I spent 10 years building the company's success. My team brought in millions, and I was their leader, the one who made it all happen. But when I walked into that office, I had no idea my entire world was about to shatter. The CEO smiled at me, but her eyes were cold. "You're fired," she said. No warning, no explanation, just like that. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't leaving quietly. I had the truth, and I was going to burn everything they built to the ground. The board would never see it coming, and neither would she. Hi, I'm James, and this is my story. It was a Thursday morning when my world started unraveling. A normal Thursday, one I'd been through hundreds of times. I walked into the office, grabbed my coffee, and checked my inbox. Everything seemed as it always had, steady, predictable. But as soon as I saw that calendar notification pop up for a meeting with the CEO, something shifted in my gut. It wasn't a usual meeting. I could feel it in my bones. Her name was Rachel, the CEO. In the years I'd been at this company, I'd watched her rise from a mid-level executive to the face of the organization. I'd never been one to play office politics, but even I knew how crucial it was to stay on her good side. That said, she had a reputation of being tough but fair. And my department? We were crushing it. I led the marketing team, and we had driven the highest growth in the company's history. My team was the reason we were expanding into new territories, signing major clients, and exceeding all targets. But here I was, being called to her office at 9:30 a.m. on an ordinary Thursday. The feeling in my gut told me it wasn't going to be good. When I entered the meeting room, Rachel's face wasn't as warm as it usually was. There were no pleasantries, no congratulations for the most recent campaign success. Just an icy professional nod. Across the table sat Mark, the CFO, his hands folded and a grim expression on his face. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong. "James," Rachel said, her voice steady, but I could hear the faintest tremor in it. "We've decided to make some changes. You've been a great asset to the company, but we're restructuring, and unfortunately, your position no longer aligns with our vision for the future." I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I couldn't process her words. A flood of thoughts rushed through my mind. What? How? Why? I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me, and I had to fight to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, Rachel?" I asked, trying to grasp the meaning of what was happening. "I've been with this company for 10 years. 10. My department has been the top performer, our numbers, our results. I don't understand." Rachel's gaze didn't waver, but I could see the briefest flicker of something. Regret? Guilt? Whatever it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "This isn't personal, James. The decision comes from the board. They've made it clear that we need a new direction. We appreciate all the hard work you've done, but the company is moving in a different direction." I heard her words, but they didn't land. They didn't feel real. The room was spinning. I built this. I gave everything to this company. I looked over at Mark, trying to find some sort of explanation in his eyes. But his face was unreadable. I opened my mouth to protest, to argue, but the words caught in my throat. I was stunned. This was a punch I hadn't seen coming. My mind raced back to the late nights, the sacrifices, the sleepless hours I had poured into making this department not just good, but great. Every marketing campaign, every pitch, every client meeting. It had all been my work, my sweat. And now, just like that, it was over. I thought back to the last company-wide meeting where the CEO had praised my team's performance in front of everyone. I remembered the high fives and the celebrations after our biggest product launch. Now it was all crumbling in an instant. How could this happen? Rachel's words snapped me back to the present. "We'll provide you with a severance package, and we'll make sure you have support during this transition. We're grateful for your time here, James." I wasn't sure how I managed to stand up from that chair. I was numb, my mind scrambled. I had built my career here, had given it my all, and now they were just letting me go. "James," Rachel called as I started to leave the room, her voice softer this time, almost like an afterthought. "I hope you understand. This wasn't an easy decision. But it was easy for them, wasn't it? To toss someone aside after years of loyalty. To treat a human being like a line item on a spreadsheet." I didn't respond. I just walked out. As I stepped out into the hallway, I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. The world around me felt surreal. The office, the faces of the people who used to smile at me, everything was suddenly alien. How could they do this? How could I not have seen it coming? I had given them my best, and now they were taking everything from me. I was walking down the hallway when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from my assistant, Emma. "Are you okay? I saw the meeting. I hope everything is fine." I didn't know what to say. The words wouldn't come. How could I explain to her that everything had just fallen apart in the blink of an eye? I didn't answer. Instead, I kept walking. Just one step after another, barely able to hold myself together. As I reached the elevator, I felt a lump form in my throat. It was a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going down without a fight. The elevator doors closed, and I descended, leaving the company I had worked so hard for behind me. But something inside me snapped. This wasn't the end. Not for me. I spent the entire drive home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The world outside was moving in a blur. Lights, traffic, people. All of it felt so distant, like I was living in a dream. No, not a dream. A nightmare. I barely remember how I made it back to my apartment. I walked in, threw my keys on the counter, and collapsed onto the couch. My phone had been buzzing non-stop, but I ignored it. What was there to say? What could anyone say? "I'm sorry?" They'll regret it. None of that mattered. I sat there, staring at the wall. My thoughts were a chaotic mess. I'd spent 10 years building this department, nurturing it, fighting for every contract, every client, every small victory, and now, in an instant, they tossed me aside like I was nothing. They think they can just push me out and forget about me. But they're wrong. They're all wrong. The anger came next. It hit me like a wave, crashing over my chest, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I had been loyal. I had given them everything I had, and this is how they repay me. The very company I'd helped build, the one I sacrificed everything for, had just destroyed me. I built this, and they were going to regret it. My phone buzzed again. This time I picked it up. It was Emma. "James, are you all right? Please call me." I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to respond. But then I slammed the phone down onto the coffee table. I couldn't talk to her. Not yet. Not when I was this furious. She had been one of the few who always supported me, but I couldn't let her see me like this. Weak, confused. But inside, I was unraveling. The anger wasn't just directed at Rachel or Mark, it was directed at the entire system. At the way they all acted like everything I'd done didn't matter. Like I was just a number, a cog in their machine. They had no idea who they were messing with. And then I thought of the board. The board. They were the ones behind this. Behind the decision to pivot. Behind the decision to fire me. They didn't even have the guts to face me. Rachel just delivered the message for them. They probably didn't even know what I had sacrificed. They probably didn't care. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me. That night I barely slept. The anger didn't let me rest. I kept thinking about the details, about what went wrong, about how all of this had fallen apart so suddenly. There had to be more to the story. I couldn't accept that it was just a restructuring decision. No way. The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. I got up early, grabbed some coffee, and sat at my desk. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I wasn't sure where to start. My whole life had been tied to this company, and now it felt like I was staring at a mountain of questions. What had changed? Why hadn't I seen this coming? What was really happening behind the scenes? I started small, going through emails, messages, and reports, anything that could give me a clue about what had led up to this moment. I didn't expect much. After all, they had always made sure the financials looked good, right? But as I dug deeper, something felt off. There were inconsistencies, slight but noticeable. Transfers that didn't make sense, budgets that didn't add up, and a whole bunch of vague language in the board reports. The further I went, the more I found. A pattern started to emerge. It wasn't just a restructuring. There was something bigger at play. Something I had been too blind to see. The marketing budget for the last quarter had been slashed, not just by a little, but by a lot. Why? My department was the one driving revenue. Why would they cut our funding? There was no reason for it, at least no logical reason. But I knew what this smelled like: corporate sabotage. Someone was playing a game, someone wanted to cripple us. And I had a sinking feeling I knew who that someone was. Rachel and Mark were just the front. They had to be. It was the board pulling the strings. I just didn't know how deep this went. That's when I decided to start gathering the pieces. I called in a few favors, reached out to some old contacts, people who might know things, little details that could give me an edge. I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not after everything I had done. The more I investigated, the clearer it became. Something was rotten at the core of this company, and I was going to expose it. I was going to burn everything to the ground if I had to. I wasn't leaving this fight empty-handed. By the end of the week, I had pieced together a disturbing picture. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. Payments that didn't make sense, hidden fees, suspicious vendors with connections I couldn't trace. The discrepancies weren't just errors, they were deliberate. But I needed more. I needed someone on the inside to confirm what I already suspected. That's when I got the call. It came late on a Friday evening, the kind of call you don't expect, but one you desperately hope for. I wasn't expecting to hear from Claire, the head of legal compliance, but there she was, her voice low and urgent on the other end. "James," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I've been going through the same files. I don't know how much longer I can stay quiet. There's something going on at the top. It's not just the restructuring, it's worse." My heart pounded as I sat upright on the couch, instinctively running my hand through my hair. "What do you mean, Claire? What's really happening?" "I don't have all the details, but I can tell you this. The money trail leads right to Rachel and Mark," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They've been covering up huge financial irregularities for months, possibly years. It's like they've been siphoning off funds through a shell game of fake contracts, off-the-books payments, and some very questionable investments. And it's all designed to make the company look good on paper while they line their pockets." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words hitting me like a freight train. This wasn't just bad business, this was corruption, the kind of corporate rot that could destroy everything. "You need to bring this to the board," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "They need to know what's really going on." "I can't, not yet," Claire replied, and I could hear the fear in her voice. "Rachel has too many allies. If I expose this now, it'll be buried before it even gets started. I'm telling you, James, I'm risking everything just by talking to you. But if you want to go public with this, I can help. I've been documenting everything." I closed my eyes, running my hand over my face. "I'm already done. I'm not letting them get away with this. But I need your help, Claire. I can't do this alone." There was a pause on the other end. Then she spoke again, quieter this time, but resolute. "All right, I'll send you the files, but you need to be careful. If Rachel and Mark catch wind of this, they'll do whatever it takes to destroy you." "I've already lost everything," I said. "They can't take anything more from me. Just send me the proof." She hesitated again, then sighed. "Okay, I'm sending you what I have. But you need to act fast. I don't know how much longer I can keep covering for them." As she hung up, I felt a mix of adrenaline and dread. This was bigger than I'd ever imagined. But there was no turning back now. If I was going to burn this all to the ground, I had to be smart about it. Rachel and Mark were dangerous, but I wasn't just going to sit idly by while they destroyed everything I'd worked for. The next few days were a blur of frantic activity. Claire sent me everything she had: documents, emails, financial statements, and transaction logs. The files were a goldmine of evidence. I stayed up late, poring over each page, each line, my mind racing as I connected the dots. What I found was worse than I'd feared. Rachel and Mark had orchestrated a financial scheme that could bring down the entire company. There were hidden accounts, fake invoicing, and money being funneled into accounts that no one should have access to. And all of this was happening under the guise of corporate restructuring. They weren't just trimming the fat. They were stealing from the company, draining it dry. The company I'd dedicated 10 years of my life to. The company I had bled for. I couldn't just sit on this information. I had to act. But I couldn't go to the authorities right away. Rachel and Mark had too many allies in the boardroom. They'd bury me before I ever got the chance to expose them. I needed leverage. That's when I decided to take the fight directly to the board. But I wasn't going to just show them the evidence. I was going to force them to see it. I wasn't going to let Rachel or Mark control the narrative anymore. I had to make them confront the truth. I spent the next 48 hours preparing, gathering the most damning evidence, drafting an emergency board meeting proposal, and contacting a few key board members I knew were on my side. There was no room for error. If I messed this up, it was over. By the time I was ready, I had everything I needed. Clear, irrefutable evidence. I made the call to Sandra, one of the few board members who had always been a staunch ally. She'd backed me up on several important decisions over the years, and I knew she was just as disgusted by Rachel and Mark's actions as I was. "James, what's going on?" Sandra asked when she answered the phone. "I've been hearing whispers about some major issues at the company. What's really happening?" "I need a favor," I said, my voice steady but filled with intensity. "I've got the evidence. I need you to set up an emergency board meeting. We're going to expose Rachel and Mark for what they've done. This company is drowning in corruption, and if we don't act now, we're all going to pay the price." Sandra was silent for a moment. Then I heard her sharp intake of breath. "You're sure about this?" "I've got everything we need, and I'm not backing down." "I'll make the call," she said. "We'll do this right. But James, you need to be prepared. This won't be easy." "I'm ready," I said. "I've been ready for this my whole career." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following week. My heart hammered in my chest as I prepared. I knew this was the moment. This was the fight I'd been waiting for, the fight I had no choice but to win. The boardroom would either be the place where I exposed the truth or where they buried me for good. I walked into the boardroom with my head held high, my resolve steel hard. The air was thick with tension. I could feel the eyes on me as I took my seat. Rachel and Mark were already there, as confident as ever, their usual polished smiles barely masking the nervousness I could see in their eyes. They didn't know what was coming. Sandra and the other board members trickled in, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. Some of them knew what was happening, but most were still in the dark. I had to make them see the truth. Now I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice. We're here today because this company, this organization that we've all built together, is being destroyed. And the people responsible for that destruction are sitting right here." A gasp rippled through the room, but I wasn't done. I wasn't here to make polite accusations. I was here to end this. "Rachel, Mark, this is it. I've got the evidence right here." I slapped a stack of documents onto the table. "These aren't just financial discrepancies, these are deliberate acts of fraud. Money has been funneled into fake accounts. Invoices have been inflated. We've got offshore accounts linked directly to both of you." Rachel's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "James, you're out of line. This is baseless, unfounded." "I don't think you want to do this, Rachel," I interrupted, sliding more papers across the table. "You think you can bury this under a sea of corporate jargon, but the evidence doesn't lie. You've been running a scam behind this company's back for months. The money has gone missing. Your money. And you're not going to get away with it." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but I could see the panic rising in his eyes. His usual smugness was gone. Rachel's confident facade was crumbling too, her hands shaking as she tried to regain control of the room. But it was too late. The board was already murmuring, flipping through the documents I had laid out. The shock on their faces was all I needed. "This isn't just a financial issue," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "This is about integrity. This is about the company we've all worked so hard to build. You've been siphoning off the profits, and now you're trying to cover it up with a restructuring plan. But we all know what this is. And it's over." The room was silent, but the tension was palpable. Some members were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others were already on their phones, making calls, trying to grasp the magnitude of what I had just laid out. Rachel's voice faltered. "You're ruining everything. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm saving this company from people like you." And with that, the room erupted. People started talking over each other, some defending Rachel and Mark, others demanding a full investigation. But the truth was already out. The board members were too shaken, too stunned to ignore what had been exposed. Sandra stood up, her face red with anger. "I second what James is saying. This cannot be swept under the rug. We need a full audit, immediately. We cannot allow this to continue." And that was it. The momentum shifted. Rachel and Mark no longer had control. The room was no longer theirs. The tide had turned. The aftermath of that meeting was nothing short of a bombshell. The board immediately called for an external audit, and the financial irregularities I had uncovered were only the beginning. Investigations into Rachel and Mark revealed a trail of corruption so deep it took down much more than just them. A full-scale corporate scandal unraveled, one that had been years in the making. By the end of the week, Rachel and Mark were both suspended, pending the investigation. Their assets were frozen. The company's reputation, already fragile, was on the brink of collapse. The public reaction was swift and unforgiving. The press covered the scandal non-stop. My name was everywhere, not as the fired employee, but as the whistleblower who had saved the company. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. The real story was the quiet conversations happening behind closed doors, where the board started to realize just how close they had come to losing everything. They were finally starting to see that I had been right all along. The following month, I was called back to the company, not as a disgraced former employee, but as the person who had saved it from destruction. The board offered me a new role, a chance to rebuild from the ground up. They wanted me as the new chief operating officer, tasked with leading the company's recovery. The offer was generous, but it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about redemption. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't just another casualty of corporate greed. I stood in the office for the first time since I had been fired, looking at the team I had built. The same team that had been left behind when Rachel and Mark had their way. But we were all still here. And now we had a chance to rebuild. The company wasn't perfect. It would never be the same again. But I wasn't just going to watch it crumble. I was going to take control, rebuild it the right way, on honesty, integrity, and hard work. We would come back stronger. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I was going to make sure of that. The days that followed the investigation were a whirlwind. The audit revealed more than just financial fraud. It revealed how deeply entrenched corruption had become at every level of the company. Rachel and Mark were both escorted out of the building, their careers in ruins, and the public was unforgiving. I had no idea what the future would hold, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let this company fall. Not again. As COO, I spent the next few months working tirelessly to restructure, to rebuild. It wasn't easy. I had to gain the trust of employees who had been through the ringer, many of whom had seen their jobs and livelihoods on the line because of decisions made at the top. But I was relentless, and slowly but surely, the company started to recover. We hired new leadership. We made sure transparency was at the heart of everything we did. The old ways, the lies, the deceit, the greed were gone. In their place, we built something new, something real. I wasn't just rebuilding a company, I was rebuilding myself. And with each success, with each small victory, I knew I had done the right thing. There's a certain kind of peace that comes with knowing you fought for what's right, even when the odds were stacked against you. I've learned the hard way that nothing lasts forever, but if you fight with everything you've got, if you refuse to let go of your integrity, you'll come out on top. And that's exactly what I did.